The two Jills, a psychologist and psychic intuitive, reveal mind-blowing insights that turn psychology, self-help, and conscious teachings on their heads. Why? Because they work. Real help, sincere growth is here. Welcome to Psyched.
Got it.
Hi, Jill.
Hey, Jill, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. So happy.
That's good. That's a good answer. I feel like scattered, like there's a lot of different things going on, and I'm in the midst of juggling, but so far none of the balls have dropped, so that's good.
Yes.
So
I don't know that
related.
scattered and happy are separate for me. Like, I think I'm
Okay.
totally scattered and totally happy. I
I
think
like to be
scattered is my
busy.
normal state.
Okay. So this relates to the topic that we have for today, which is emotional intelligence.
I think we should start, since we're going to be talking about emotions today, and I think everybody's ready for this topic at this point if they've been listening to the podcasts. But I think we should start with something people don't often think about, which is, what is your view of emotions? What is my view of emotions? I think we should almost like define them
I like that.
before we get into, are they helpful or harmful, and when to listen, when not to listen.
Sounds good. Do you want to give us the clinical definition as you
I
know
don't
it?
really know what the clinical definition is, but I'll talk to you about more my operating definition
Okay,
of
I like it.
how I've come to see them. For me, emotions are not the same as the gut that everybody talks about. There's a difference there, and a lot of our emotions are feelings that we get in response to stimuli. But when you really think about it, none of that stimuli to the brain is new. So your emotions are more programmed than you think. And we have done a lot to tell people, and in fact, I used to do this when I was working as a psychologist, which was, if you're emoting too much, get your brain involved and start thinking a little. If you're thinking too much, get your heart involved. So we were trying to shift the balance there. But I think I misunderstood even at that time that emotion and thinking, they're all the same thing, or they're all intrinsically connected. It's not so easy to change the balance if you don't understand what they are. So my focus here is to talk about how emotions are more programmed than we think, and then how to get to the heart of our true emotions, which are much more spontaneous, that we don't have a lot of access to.
Okay, I like that. And the framework that I'll use for the conversation is, I'm always looking for the topic, and is it helping you be your best you, or is it making it harder for you to be? And I'm using your somebody's personal, their favorite version of themselves. Is their emotional system and their thoughts? We've talked a lot about thoughts in the brain, and now you're mentioning that those are related, which is great. But are your emotions helping you be the you that you like best, or are they hindering your ability to be the you that you like best?
I like that. All right. So I think this is going to be good. So how do we want to begin?
I would like to talk about maturity first, and I'm not
Okay.
talking about age. Okay.
No,
This
definitely
is
not.
age independent of age and maturity. That I know for myself, the immature versions of my Jill, when I did happen to be younger, oh my gosh, my emotions, they did hijack me. I mean, I have vivid memories of hating to lose a game. Losing Candyland just felt like the world is definitely ending today. You know,
Yes.
the world as I know it has ended because I lost at Candyland. I just hated to lose. So that emotional, I shut down emotionally. So maybe we all have that, but I have very, very clear recollections of what it felt like when my emotions would freeze, or I felt like I was so in the tsunami of emotion and I couldn't feel choices of who and what I was in that moment, what I was saying, what I was doing, what I was choosing. It was just being knocked over by the emotion. So I know what that feels like. I think for me, it did come with maturity and life experiences and just realizing that I am more than my emotions. And That was really helpful. So for anyone that is feeling like, oh my God, my emotions overwhelm me, it's really harming my relationships, and there's nothing I can do about it. I disagree. There's a lot that you can do about it. And I like what you were talking about, Jill, because one of the first things to do about it is give yourself space from your emotions. It's
Yes.
almost like observing that, like a weather forecast. Okay, there is a storm on the East Coast. Let's give you some room, get you over to California, get you some space to observe. Okay, there's a part of you that's experiencing rage, pain, sadness, grief, whatever that is. There's a part of you, and you got to give yourself a little room from it so that you do feel more authority for yourself amidst that emotion still happening. I don't think you can shut down those emotions. That's not a strategy I recommend anyway.
Right.
But just giving yourself some space from it, that's not the only thing going on, but it can feel like it is.
It's interesting. I remember when I was younger in my 20s being overwhelmed by my emotions also. And that's where the idea came of like, I have to use my brain more. I have to try and control that more. I always felt like I was like a live nerve ending. And it was overwhelming, as you said. And I knew at one point, like, I got to get a handle on this, because it definitely felt like it was kind of crushing me. And I wasn't happy. I felt very out of control, really, is what it feels like. And emotions do that to you. They do make you feel like they're beyond your control. The emotion itself doesn't really matter. It's how we respond to that emotion. It's similar as to how we respond to our thoughts. And we take emotions so personally, and we take thoughts so personally. And I think that's the distance that I don't know if you're saying that, but we need some emotional distance from our emotions, and we need some intellectual distance from our emotions. And so to not take them personally and not make them about us, to say, so as an example, when I was younger, I used to say, I'm so anxious all the time. Why am I so anxious? Me, anxious. We were one. Me and anxiety were one and the same. I didn't have an identity outside of it. It was such a consuming emotion. And you feel it in your body. You feel it. And so you're kind of saying to yourself, how can this that is so overwhelming and so palpable not be real? Or how can I get distance from something that feels like it's inside me that I have no control over? And I think that's what we can talk about, strategies for creating that distance. And just to harp on it again, this idea of depersonalizing, almost dissociating. In psychology, they think dissociating is really bad, but I think dissociating from your emotion and just saying, oh, look at that. There's an emotion. It's overwhelming. It's depersonalizing it in a way. And just as mainstream people who aren't suffering from an extreme psychosis or something like that, this is a very, very useful, it sort of just takes the sting out a lot of this stuff, and you look at your emotions more clinically rather than they're part of me and something seems broken.
And in addition to the word clinically, I would like to offer rationally, that our emotions can be so irrational. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but to be aware of that is super important. I do want to recommend a strategy for people in terms of giving themselves space from that emotion. I'm very visual, and I love to give kind of a visual representation. So I'm sitting here at a desk, and even when I'm doing some of my teaching work, consciousness and spirituality communities and philosophy communities, there is this visualization of sitting at a desk and just allowing yourself to feel whatever you're feeling, think about whatever you're thinking, and imagine you're setting it on the table, and then you're pushing it off to the one side. You're pushing it off to a corner of the desk or a corner of the table. And just notice that even by doing that, there's like this, okay, I can breathe, because sometimes we're not as aware of how close we're holding the emotional energy and how stifling it can feel.
I like that. I think
what's a strategy that you use, Jill?
Well, one of the strategies for me is I have that, I'm not that. For me, if I say I am anxious, I'm owning it, or I am sad, or I am unhappy. I am making a lasting thing out of a temporary emotion. So recognizing that emotions are temporary, and there's this line, don't make a permanent decision out of a temporary emotion from a fleeting emotion. And that's a really important thing. These emotions are fleeting. So don't turn them into characteristics. Don't turn them into labels and identifications. And that's something that you then have to fix or overcompensate for. So again, that's the separation. I caught myself so many times saying, I'm anxious, I am unhappy, I am. And they were all emotional states. So
and it sounds like you're saying that when you do that, you are really not giving yourself the space. You're removing any space between you and the emotion because you're owning it as your, at least momentary, identity.
You're owning it as something, identities are, from our perspective, lasting, durable. So it's a weird thing to own something as an identity that's durable. And so even when you think, well, hey, I'm anxious all the time, it's because you own it in each moment.
Yeah.
You are repeating. And that's where I say emotions are mostly programmed. So when you were young and you had a reaction to a dog, even if the dog didn't do anything to you, right? You have this fear-based response toward that dog. Then you say, I am afraid of dogs. You generalize it to all dogs, even though you had one experience. And then it does take on a life of its own, because each time you see a dog, which is probably quite frequent, you're going to have that recurring brain pattern of, now I'm afraid. I see dog, now I'm afraid. And so now you're an adult, and you know it's not rational to be afraid of every dog out there, especially ones that are 50 feet away from you. They've lost their sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's become programmed in there, and it just keeps replaying. And it's the programs that you and I talk about a lot, those kind of loops, but people don't see their emotions as programmed. It's very, very interesting. I'm not sure they see their thoughts that way either, but anything you've done over and over again is not a new emotion. And that's why we feel like we don't have control over it.
Okay. I do want to refer people to the anxiety episode that we did. If they're kind of locking in on the, oh yes, I have that, I want help with that. Because I think we covered that really, really well in that anxiety episode. So if we could kind of put that part to the side.
Yes.
On the emotional front, I've noticed that people tend to have a favorite emotion, right? So they may really not like to feel sad because it feels powerless, most likely, but they enjoy feeling angry or fired up. And then other people can feel the opposite. If they're people pleasers, they probably don't. Anger is not their favorite emotion, but they're willing to feel maybe helpless or frustrated or something else. So I think that would be an interesting thing for people to consider, is what is your kind of, on the emotional scale, on the emotional rainbow, what's your favorite color? And how often do you use that to restore power, maybe in a situation, to assert your authority? I'm not saying that has to be good or bad, but I think being aware of that is a step in self-awareness that's really, really helpful. I definitely know that I have my favorites, and I may overplay those cards sometimes.
I think I do. Yes, I think I can see that in myself also. I have like a really good feisty streak.
Ranty. Yeah, rant, which is anger. Yeah. It's a form of, I hope, healthy, productive anger. We have something to say about something, So yes. I hope it helps me be a better Jill. Of course, there are going to be emotions. If somebody doesn't like a ranter or somebody that gets on a soapbox, then that will affect how they view you. So that's important to consider too in relationships. If there are some people that just don't get you, where you feel like you're not clicking, it could be that there's an emotional almost incompatibility there, that your favorite emotion, I'm aversive to victimology. There, and
Yes,
I
me
help
too.
clients with this all the time. But the minute I feel that kind of, well, it isn't fair, and my life is, I'm just like, oh, here we go, right? But that's on a personal front. On a personal front, I just want to empower that person so badly, but they keep playing that victim card over and over and over again. And I find it frustrating in personal relationships. I actually love helping clients with that because through rationality and appealing to their sense of logic and their intelligence, it's amazing the little keys that can unlock those doors. And simple things like, well, do you like to be somebody that people worry about? Do you like to be somebody that people are concerned that you can't do it or that it's not going to go your way? And it's amazing how some clients will go, no, I don't want to be that person. I'm like, okay, now we've got an opportunity here.
Exactly. And you and I are the same in our personal relationships, because our personal relationships, we're not there having an open conversation about healing. We're having a conversation about whatever is victimizing somebody in our orbit. So
Just enjoying each other in a friendship. Ideally, those are
exactly.
my favorite friendships now. We're just having fun together.
You know, I do the same. I have an incredible amount of impatience for the victim mode, you know, so we definitely share that trait. So I realized that I had a very specific sort of cynical anger. I used to call myself an angry person, and actually find a lot of, you know, and I say I didn't have the love gene. And so it felt powerful, or it felt animated. It felt alive. And it didn't occur to me that there were other ways to feel that way. So I did get stuck in some kind of limited emotional band. So part of it was not allowing certain emotions like sadness, victimization, things like that, because I was intolerant in other people of those things. And I will say that at a certain point, I realized how skewed I was. And this is another tack that I offer. If you can take what Jill's saying and point out your favorites, and then say, well, what if I expand that? So that is what I actually had to do. I had to expand my emotional repertoire because I was responding to everything with just a very limited bandwidth. And I noticed it and I didn't like it. And so I had to let in a lot of those things that I did have impatience for in other people. And I would say, like, where do I do that? Where am I that? And look at other people's emotions and say, where do I do that? And I would always find that in my own life in various ways. And it's really more metaphorical, I will say. It's not, where do I do exactly what that person's doing? Where do I complain about X? You have to be a little more thoughtful about it. But when I started allowing just a wider bandwidth of emotion, number one, I felt like things started to slow down. That reactivity of just having that emotion and having it come so fast and being like, that's what I got for you. It really slowed me down a lot. And I think it made me more, so I was feeling more emotions. It was making me calmer, I'll say, but it also made me more receptive to other people. If I was being a clinician, I was 100% receptive because I knew what I was there for. But in my life, when you're just living your life, I was not the same. And so I started to see that it made a difference.
That's so cool that you saw that. So I'm kind of hearing what you're talking about, Jill, as you created a softer version of you for your personal life. Is that accurate?
Yes, and that was the way that I did it. And maybe I was skewed because I was saving all my compassion for my clients, and then I get home, I'm like, don't tell me a problem. Like, I can't, you know, like I'm fried on that. I really don't know what it was, but it did help me soften by having more of those emotions that I was intolerant of in people just in my everyday life, in traffic and wherever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. This opportunity to look at your favorite emotion, and I feel like what you're expanding on is that these emotions they're non-binary. They're so related. So anything that I'm angry about, there's a part of me that's sad about something. If I'm angry about the state of politicians, I'm sad that the citizens aren't getting the leadership that I feel like we deserve. So sadness is not my go-to emotion. I feel it's so disempowered. So it's not my favorite color on the rainbow of
Agreed.
emotions.
Guilty.
But I've really begun to embrace it more, especially in the past, well, probably since I had kids, because sadness for me is my on-ramp to my compassion. And I love my compassionate side. I think my compassionate side it serves me very well. I'm very empathic. So being compassionate is serving that strength that I have too. And you look at that as a strength, not a weakness. But empowering individuals that are compassionate to not let your sadness or concern for another hijack your sense of you and the choices and the opportunities that you have in your life. That's a big one.
And I like that. So I think we're talking about the gradations of emotions. Are you choosing that emotion, or is that emotion choosing you? So I had this angry streak, but it would come out all the time. So conversations would devolve. I remember talking to my daughter's college. They really screwed her at college, and it was ridiculous. And I was like, I'm the consumer. What's happening here? So there was just injustice and whatever. And I just opened a can on this guy of the housing, like, holy cow, I lost my mind. And it was very out of control. And my kids, it started out controlled, but then it just got insane. And I sounded like a crazy person. And my kids were like, Mom, there was nothing impressive about, what just transpired here. And they were right. And so for me, allowing a lot of other emotions in, stopped me in a lot of ways from getting to that level, like I said. But I didn't vilify anger. Since that moment, now when I get angry, I think about it, because there's always a pause. I'm like, is this where I want to get angry? And then I think, yes, I do. And then I open up the can. So it's a much different, I am choosing my emotions and how I want to behave, rather than just doing it and regretting it later. Or being taken advantage of. If you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're just compassionate for everybody and everything, and you got tire tracks on your back, that is something that you want to look out there. And you want to say, do I choose to be compassionate here? Not every moment is a compassionate moment. Just like not every moment is an anger moment. We have to be much more thoughtful about the emotions that we tee up. We're teeing them up. They're not and shouldn't be just reactive. Us in a reactive state is by definition out of control. We are victims of our circumstances by definition if we are just reacting to them and not choosing our reaction to them.
Yes.
And there's just it's so subtle. There's reaction, and then there's the choice of reaction. And most of us are not doing the latter.
These words are coming to me as you're saying this, and they're inspired by my heart. Are your emotions operating you, or are you operating your emotions? Yes. And I love that we both have examples, because I can think of some with my kids where they thought I was going to not open the can. My can probably isn't nearly as impressive as yours. I don't know if that's a good thing, Jill. I can be very clear and assertive when I need to, but it's normally like Professor Jill kind of mode. And it's like, it's this face. Oh, really? Kind of thing. And it's funny because my younger daughter, sometimes my whole family, we all just know each other so well. And they'll just, when something shady is about to happen, and and they all just kind of look at me like, oh, what's she going to do? Right?
Yes.
Is she going to fix this for all of us because something unfair just happened or whatever? Anyway, but there are times that I don't say anything. And I think it was my younger one recently. She said, I'm surprised you didn't say anything when we were in that store. And I said, I thought about it, but it just didn't feel like it was going to make a difference. And she goes, yeah, because sometimes it's just not worth it. And that's an example of me operating my emotions in that case, because I did have something to be upset about, or there was something, that could have been done better. And I could have said something, but I had my choices. Maybe I just wasn't up to it that day, or there was just like, say la vie. It is what it is. I'm probably not going to change this, and let's just move on. And then let it go. And then that's the important part. And then let it go, right? I have a close friend, and she may listen to the podcast. Let me neutralize something here. Something's been happening in her profession that is really, really irking her. Her profession has been through the ringer with COVID and the pandemic and all that stuff. And she doesn't enjoy her job as much as she doesn't enjoy her career as much as she did before. And I haven't seen her in years. We got together, Jeff and I both got together with them. And I swear to you, that's the only thing we talked about was her stories of how messed up her profession is now. And I'm just like, that's so sad. And I kind of, gave little kind of softballs to let's talk about something else. And hey, your kitchen looks great, your remodel, whatever. Nothing. It would just, it kept steering back to that. So she needed someone to talk to about that. I know I wasn't the only one. She's probably talking to everybody about this. I'm just sad for her, right? Yeah. Because a profession that she loved and always wanted to do has changed in fundamental ways that she doesn't enjoy it anymore. And she doesn't know how to fix it. She's decades away from retirement. And it's just sad. So I'm not mad at her. I'm super sad for her about the situation. There's that compassion, but it's also not my problem. So I had to get it out of my system a bit on the drive home with Jeff, like, oh my God, you got to hear this, And then I was like, it's just sad, isn't it? And then I just kind of, my name is not on that problem. I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
But I'm also sad for her. It's complicated. It's messy. There's not a specific thing she can do to fix it. And my mature Jill knows that. Probably a 20 or 30-year-old Jill probably would have thought, oh, I know exactly what she should do.
I am a reformed fixer. I think I was always, everything out of my mouth was a fixer. That was my one setting for my whole life. And I would say now I'm probably in my recovery. I'll give myself 40% fixer, 60% not fixer. But yeah, that was a hard one thing. But your point to letting your emotions go is the whole point. They are fleeting. They shouldn't be so sticky. And I think, my theory is that we misunderstand what they are. We take them as facts. We think our emotions are showing us something. That's not true. Mm-mm. Our emotions are just as they've always been. It's not really anything new happening there. And so I just feel like we have to dial it back. They're super powerful because they make you act. That's what emotions do. They create action. But if you're just working on program, your action is going to be the same action you took last time. And so it's really important to get these emotions off of the program wheel and into the choice wheel. And we're doing that by the things that you and I are suggesting, by becoming more, I know where this is going. I've been down this road before. Do I want to go down that road again? And I'm really just talking about emotion. I'm not talking about the action. Mm-hmm. If you're already contemplating an action, it's coming. Thought first, emotion second, action third. That's the program. Thought, emotion, action. The most space that you can create for yourself between thought, emotion, and action, the more choice points you have to pivot and have a new outcome.
I love it. And that definitely fits within are you operating your emotions or are your emotions operating you? That transition is so big for individuals that feel like, no, it's an emotion, like I can't choose it, but you can choose what it means to you in that moment, and whether you are what that emotion is leading you towards in terms of your actions, your decisions of who and what you are. Yeah. We parents do this a lot, just getting almost blinded by I was disrespected, or my child was disrespecting me. I told her to do this, and they're just like, oh, they're all flustered about it, and I have to do something. I have to take action. That's the worst time to take action. You need to calm the fudge down first,
You
so that
do.
you can see, okay, now, and again, is this a program? Have we been here before? My husband and I just went through this recently, and we're a great team. Really just like, okay, I think we tried that last time though, and here we are again.
Yes.
So let's try something radical this time. What about this? And what about that? What's another way to look at this? And it had a much better outcome than it ever did before. So anyway, I don't want to go into specifics because it's personal, but there's just so many opportunities to slow all of that, the emotional overwhelm, slow it down so that you do give yourself more space from it, and you can more clearly, and I hope logically and intelligently, consider what's the best response, if any. You don't have to respond to your emotions. Like you said, Jill, they're not facts. Your emotions are not facts. They don't even have to be wise, right? So there's so much, well, that's my, what's the phrase? Well, that's my experience. That's my experience. Okay, but your experience might be totally distorted in your sense of self. Your experience might be a complete fabricated distortion, emotion riddled experience that is manufactured. It's fiction. And so if you don't like your experience, then rewrite it. Utilizing emotions and thoughts and more objectivity, more time and space for you to really reflect on. But what do you want your experience to meant the experience to be by you being you in a different way?
100%. And I don't think we have been given the permission or the handbook because people don't really do it. There's this whole in the spiritual realm about intuition, and emotions are intuitive because they're beyond your thinking. No, they're a product of your thinking. They're not beyond your thinking. It's when you have an emotion, you're not even aware of your thought that preceded that emotion. You have no idea. And so I would tell people, you had a thought you didn't know. It only came to light when, because if you really think about it, let me back up a second. Programs are triggered. And we usually don't catch the trigger until the emotion, because most of us are not aware of our thoughts. And so we're triggered. The emotion is the first thing we feel, even though that's not the first part of the program. And then we act on that. So for me, I tell people, look, you know what the 3 parts are right now. If the emotion is already coming over you, just let it be. Once the train has left the station, it's not going back in. And that's when you go to what we talked about earlier, which is ride it, but don't keep it. And when it's done, let it go. Don't keep reviving it with thought, because at that point, you're doing it. The first time it happens, you didn't see the thought. But if you're replaying the scenario, you are reviving that emotion and that program with thought. And that's on you at that point. So yes, after it happens, the program ran, you punched somebody out, whatever it was, that's done. You can see my anger flaring. Anyway, that person's out cold, you're done, and you reset. You don't keep replaying it. That is a danger zone. That reinforces something you don't want reinforced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slowing it down. I love how you said that, because even in the midst of an emotion like fear, where you can it's that tsunami experience. I love the strategy of just, okay, I'm noticing that I'm feeling a sense of fear right now. All right. And just observing it, you being the observer of the emotion as you operating the emotion versus the emotion operating you. So that's a wonderful, allowing yourself the power of observation is so great. Taking a breath, maybe even saying it out loud. In my interpersonal relationships, I definitely do that with my kids and my husband. I notice I'll declare the emotion I'm feeling, to be honest with myself, and to give them a heads up. I know if somebody's telling me a story or something, I'm like, I'm listening. I notice myself getting frustrated as I'm listening to this, and I'm just observing that. Go ahead. I'm ready for the next part. There's something about that that takes it takes the steam out of that engine of the emotion
Yes.
by saying, I see you. I get it. I've just said it out loud. I'm not hiding it, right? I'm not hiding it from me. I'm not hiding it from these other people that are involved in this experience. I
Yes.
feel like that's a really successful strategy because it's authentic. And I think
It
that's the
is.
sneakiest part about emotions is they can be so sneaky and under the radar. So bringing them up within visibility, within awareness, putting it right out there, it's easier.
I don't think people talk about their emotions in a way that enhances conversation
Yeah.
or that brings people together. I think emotions are so personalized and we take them so seriously, and we will happily throw somebody else under the bus because our emotions are right and real and informative. And so I do feel that we can, like you're saying, open up this great area of conversation just by acknowledging we're always talking about the facts. We're talking about you did this, you did that. Even if someone says you made me feel this way, that's an attack. That is a judgment. Nobody made you feel any which way. You could have a program that you're reacting to that person in that way, but that just means you didn't choose your emotion in that moment. Because if somebody says something to me and I think about how I want to react to it, I don't blame that person for my reaction, even if I want to be upset about it. There's an awareness that, you know what, I really didn't like that. That really upsets me. I'm going to be upset with that. But I don't have to go into the next step, which is like, you caused it, I blame you, and whatever else that brings. So getting
I
back to
need an apology before we can be friends
right.
again.
Oh my God, yesterday, right? There was a woman outside, and this is another important piece that we anticipate people's emotions and then do weird things based on that. So I was outside at lunch. This woman had 3 kids that were young kids. And we started a conversation. We're talking, and the kids were young and they were hungry and they were being totally disruptive to her, not to me. I didn't give a shit. So I'm sitting there, I'm calm as can be. And she is yelling at her kids saying, this woman doesn't want to hear. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I have nothing to do with this. And then she made the son, who was probably 4, apologize for interrupting me. And I shut it down and I said, I am not having a problem. I understand that this is stressful, and I didn't want, it was a weird situation because I didn't want to go against the mother who's saying, apologize, apologize, apologize. But it was the most awkward thing. And I said, I'm 100% fine. I am not bothered by this at all. And then when when he looked at me and he's like 4 years old, like, what do? I said, I accept your apology. He didn't even say a word. I said, apology accepted. It's all good. But she was anticipating, like she was embarrassed, I guess, anticipating how I was seeing this situation and then really behaving in a way that was just making everything so awkward
Harder.
and tense.
I want to decode that situation intuitively because the read that I get on it is that the mother has a very clear expectation of what she feels like even her young children should be capable of in terms of self-control and behavior in public. And she's utilizing a stranger, right? Because you guys didn't know each other. She's utilizing a stranger as almost like her weapon for trying to get their compliance.
Exactly.
And she may use that program their whole life.
And she was already irritated. So we were waiting a long time to be seated.
Mm-hmm.
So she was already kind of irritated with that. So her choice in that moment she was already emotionally amped up.
Yeah. Oh,
whereas
so
I was waiting for tables too.
I know.
But she was worried, her kids would make it, etc. So, I mean, the point, the point being that if she had said something like, I'm sorry, this is embarrassing. Are you okay? Is this troubling for you? Like we could have
asking you versus
we
assuming.
could have had a dialogue, about it, which would have been like, I totally get it. It's, instead I had to kind of in fits and starts tell her, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, abort. So I think that we don't do that. And, if you listen back at some of other podcasts, I've definitely talked about how my son triggered me one time in a conversation. And I was like, ooh, I feel it. Wait, something's happening. I caught you, got you. It's like, grab the something by the tail. I don't know, tail on the donkey or something. As soon as you can recognize, like, oop, it's peaked, whether you feel it in your body, you feel it on an airplane, you feel it in any situation, you're like, oh, there it goes. You're getting your trigger. And that Course in Miracle calls that the holy instant, that moment of awareness, where, as you describe, you can change everything just by saying, there's a choice point here.
Yeah.
There's a choice point.
Oh, I'm just saying a prayer for that mother, that she feels more understanding and compassion for her kids, and compassion and respect for the others. And just, there's so many other ways that she could be responding to her kids being kids. And I appreciate that everybody has their own value system about how young humans are supposed to behave in public. I completely acknowledge that variety. And of course, I have my own opinions about that. But yeah, I'm just so sad, because there's so many other successful strategies she could be using versus the weapon of strangers and keeping them comfortable, which she doesn't have control over your comfort anyway. So the whole thing is a facade. The whole thing is a facade.
That's another piece of this, right? Is that when it comes to emotions, a lot of times, and it is common in relationships and in parenting, probably in the workplace too, actually, now that I think about it. So we are often trying to manage other people's emotions. And you can't manage your own. Let's just be honest. So let's try not to manage other people's. Give them the respect that is due, that they will manage their own emotions. And I'm going to say even children. Let everybody manage their emotions, because what you end up doing is there's fear of emotion. We're creating a fear of emotion. That's something we won't be able to handle. Something, I don't know what we've done with them, but we've really blown them up so much bigger than they need to be. Yes, they cause behavior, but they don't need to everything be so like, I'm worried that this person is going to feel that way, so I'm going to do this. That is a very stultifying way to live, if you really think about it. Trying to manage all of your children's emotions, all your spouse's emotions. Well, he's not going to like that, so I don't want to go there. Okay.
Yeah.
That's treating everybody like a baby.
Exactly. Weaponized is the word that I want to use. We've weaponized emotions, and I don't feel like that's new. I have so many examples in my personal life, and obviously in my profession, of examples of, well, you don't want to do that because that might make them mad, or you don't want to do that because that might make them sad. And then I love to say, what happens when that person is sad? What happens when your mom or your mother-in-law is angry at you? Let's really just like, what's the worst thing that can happen here? Let's see how scary this monster really is. Yes. And there's so much veiled threats involved in individuals that are manipulative. Don't you make me mad? Parents do that. Don't you make me mad? It's like, well, what happens if I make you mad?
And, maybe that's where it goes. Maybe that's like the seminal point of where this all came from. Is like, we don't want to inspire other people's ire, or we don't want to be the cause of their happiness. That's why we lie in relationships, because we don't want to cause someone pain. But the message is they're weak, or they can't handle it. It is a really, what would you call it? Condescending way to be, if you think about it. Everybody is sovereign for their own space, their own aura. I don't know what you would call it. Emotions. You're here to honor that. Yeah. Not tiptoe around it.
No. Yep. I keep thinking of examples of parents, but bosses definitely do. Anyone that's in an authoritarian position, when they're mad, the whole stomping of the feet, the slamming of doors, there's just such a showiness, to, well, I'm mad now, you're all going to pay. And it's just like, because you're stomping your feet. As a kid, that might be terrifying, but I'm an adult. What do you want from me? You know what I mean? So in that instance, there's the example of somebody, through whatever various means, are forcing others to feel responsible for the emotion that they're having. I know there's a cliche and a stereotype of women crying to get what they want. Oh, you made me sad. And oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Never mind.
We're not
We can
cynics.
totally do what you want. So there are a lot of kind of subtle or overt games that are played utilizing emotions. And that's something really important to utilize too. I am I've been called a high sensitive before, which I don't like. I mean, that's like, oh, I want to be tougher than that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I think it's actually my high sensitivity that allows me to do the work that I do. I think it's part of my intuition, part of my channeling and all of that stuff. So it's one of my strong suits, but it's not my favorite. I don't like that part of it. But I realize how easily I can make or want to make my emotional state someone else's job. Like, I'm sad and you need to get me out of it. Or I'm angry and it's your fault and I need you to get angry with me. Or this won't be as enjoyable. This won't go the way I want.
Misery
And tell
loves
everybody,
company.
exactly.
Right? Misery loves company.
So funny. Yeah.
And
So just kind of, yeah. And
Yeah.
again, think of how many relationships are, I want to say, hindered or harmed or made toxic by somebody's emotional immaturity or emotional lack of awareness. Maybe they're not aware of how they utilize their emotions to hijack a situation or get what they want or derail a conversation. Or to me, that is where traditional therapy would be awesome for somebody. Somebody that can help them deconstruct. I help people with that too, but I'm not set up as a let's have 10 sessions over 3 months and like
See,
this
that
thing.
person is not in therapy. You know who's in therapy? All the people who have to deal with that person.
That's so true. Yeah. Oh
Right?
God, Jill, that was very poignant. I completely agree. Yeah. Yes. Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, that's so funny because there are so many individuals. I'm like, I don't know what to do with my adult daughter. I don't know what to do with my wife. She does this and she does that. I'm like, well, what are you expecting me to say? Because I already know you've tried everything. So she should be the one asking me, how can I fix this? Not you trying to figure out what other tap dance you can do to try to keep the peace.
Right. And look, we don't want to minimize how, if you're in a family structure, you're in a relationship, you're in an office, keeping the peace is part of the job. You can't have things blowing up all the time. I think what you and I are saying is there's almost like a space where things can remain important without you taking them personally. I think it's such a space. It's almost like missed by the brain in some ways. In order for it to be important, we have to take it personally. And I'm going to say, no, let's separate that a little bit more. The brain can play along. We can bring it in service of what we're trying to do here rather than have it do its own thing. For an example, when I tell people not to take things seriously, they're like, Jill, my job is very important to me. I'm like, okay, I'm not saying your job is not important. So the brain goes right to this. You don't understand. You can't be cavalier. This is the money I need for my family. I am not saying that these things are not important, but you can still separate yourself from them and saying, yeah, they're important, but the level of importance that I'm giving it right now, or the way I'm responding to that level of importance, is really tying me up in knots. Yes. And I have to have a new relationship with things that are important.
Yep.
Right. And not have this automatic assumption that it's important. I'm allowed to behave any way I want.
Or operating you.
And that goes for health. That goes for finances. These are all things, yes, they are very, very important, but they don't have to take you to a place that feels almost fixed, where there's no inroad there. There's always an inroad as to how you want to perceive something, yes, important, and then still be able to bring all your faculties, not just the desperation, to the situation, because desperation, that's the worst. in terms of you are not functioning well. You are functioning on no cylinders when desperation is the motivation.
That's right. When somebody feels trapped in an emotionally charged situation, they lose their objectivity, which shuts down their wisdom and their intelligence, their sense of gut feeling, their sense of intuition. They feel like, no, you don't understand. I don't have a choice here. I have to respond this way. I have to respond in this emotional, this is terrible kind of way. And I find it in that moment, there's very little that a person can hear because they're so consumed in the emotions are operating them. So they're not interested in objectivity. They're not interested in choices. They're not interested in scenario analysis or anything like that. They are consumed and consuming, but it's a dual cycle. And it's so it's just like, oh, okay, so call me when you're relaxed.
And
I've got ideas for you.
This is why when somebody is in crisis, if you're helping someone who you know is in a crisis, or you're in a crisis yourself, weathering the crisis is the job at hand. But there's no healing in weathering the crisis. That's just rewriting the ship. That's just getting you to some form of operational baseline where your head is just a little bit above water. That's where the work begins. Post-crisis, people do not understand that. So a lot of people who go to therapy, they're like, okay, crisis averted. And then they leave therapy. Or they'll take a medication to help them stave off the crisis or to dial it down a little bit.
Dial down the emotions.
And then, right. And then they'll be like, well, I don't need talk therapy because I'm taking this pill. But nothing has fundamentally changed. You're just resetting your baseline. So the program that we've been discussing is still in there. You haven't done anything to it. You've just put it on ice for a little while. So that's why we are doing this podcast. So hopefully you're sitting down and you're kind of calm and you're in a reflective state, and you're able to take some of this in. I'm sure that things that Jill and I say are triggering, and it'd be like, ooh, but notice that, use that and say, okay, I disagree. Things that are important, and just say, oh, look what that's got my backup already. I'm having an emotional response to that. What did that hit? What thought or belief did that hit that makes me want to throw this baby out with the bathwater and just reject everything that we're saying? So I think there is a difference between crisis, just to summarize that. There is no healing in that space. There's no fundamental shift. There's just reducing the inflammation.
Yeah. And the pattern that you just described, Jill, to me is exactly how someone gets in a situation of abusive situations or a neglectful situation for years. Right? All of a sudden, 10 years later, they're like, yeah, this is, and then they find more of that objectivity, or I should say they create, because I don't think they found it. They created more of that objectivity of, I can't do this anymore. I refuse. Different boundary lines, different level of, I would say, self-love and self-respect, and what that individual deserves versus what the other person has been subjecting them to in repetitive abuse or neglect situations. Any kind of abuse, by the way, including emotional abuse, mental abuse, all of it. But I think that's why it takes so long, is that there's so many individuals that they're put in survival mode day after day after day, where they're constantly in that crisis state. And I think that's the possibly subconscious method of the abuser, of the manipulator, is keeping them off their game so that they don't have that moment of clarity of, okay, wait a minute. Now, wait, you said that 10 times ago that you were sorry and that you'd never do it again. And here we are again. And it's 10 days from, this is never going to end until
and that's why in those instances where you see repetitive patterns, that is where it is helpful to extricate yourself from the situation. When people move across the country, they're like, I got to get out of here. And they make a big move. That's not required, you know? And again, wherever you go, you run into yourself. So something still has to be handled here because it always takes two to tango. But when you're emotionally bereft that way, you really do need to take a time out because you can't get your bearings. You don't have a leg to stand on. There's nothing there for you. This is on replay. Like it's like the same song is replaying over and over and over again. And the only thing that's changing is that the song starts to play faster.
Yeah.
So, you know, when people always say, I just have to get out of here. Yes, you have to get out of there, but you have to do work. This is not your problem, but you can't get your bearings if you don't break the cycle for a minute, break the program for a second.
And one way to break that cycle I would recommend for people is just taking that breath and really asking yourself, who's an objective person that would be honest with me about this?
Mm-hmm.
And that may be somebody you know, that may be somebody you hire, maybe somebody like you and I, Jill. It may be, there's always somebody that will probably come to mind of, you know, they probably wouldn't lie to me about this. And it's hard to be honest in those situations. It does take a very specific type of individual that loves you enough to tell you offer you their perspective of truth. And then you get to decide whether you agree with them or not. But that's just in terms of emotions and how emotions can be so manipulated. I'm just so hyper aware now when I notice somebody that uses emotions in a manipulative way and wants to manipulate my emotions. Even commercials for things like animal abuse, I'm like, okay, here we go. They've got all the right strings they're going to pull, and it's 1 a.m. and I shouldn't be up watching television anyway. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, so do I care about that? Yes, but I can't do that. I'm way too empathic for that type of messaging. It's just like, anyway. Yeah.
Well,
so I know myself is what I'm saying. I know my own emotions. I know how they can be used, and I know that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if you're dysfunctional after the experience.
Yes. And look, marketing is it is emotional manipulation. I mean, that is what it is. It is really like, if you look at even the titles of courses the titles of the courses that you learn in college, wow. I mean, this is like some, you know, like propaganda stuff. It's really people, they are in your head. So be careful. So marketing is another good example, you know, about that type of, no matter what the stimulus is, we have to be online. We have to find a way as much as possible to get ourselves online. And I think that I have had this experience where the more I do it, the more I do it. But the less I do it, the less I do it. And I always tell whoever I'm working with or whoever wants my advice on something, I'm like, it's going to take you 2 weeks. Vigilance to try and say, having this emotion. And then your brain is going to say, but it's justified. Your brain is going to try to keep you in there with justifications, rationalizations. It's going to say, no, but this time it's justified. Let's just say no emotions are justified. Just as a blanket statement for 2 weeks, don't automatically think because he does X, I do Y. Just cut the tie. And just say, oh, look at that. I don't know how to respond to that. I know the way my brain wants me to respond to it emotionally, but I don't know what that is. I don't know how to respond to it. And I've talked about this before. This is how I do everything. I just get stupid. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I feel. I don't know what I think. I don't know what that is. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you mean. There's this whole just letting everything just fall to the ground rather than me weaving this story around it. And then letting it control me.
I like that. In those relationships where somebody is possibly manipulating somebody's emotions, whether they're aware of it or not, I think sometimes they're not aware of it. It's subconscious. It's their own programs operating. There's so many opportunities for just like, oh my God, I get it, right? I've had so many clients over the years, even from the very beginning of, well, what, you know, my partner, they come home grumpy and I always feel so bad. And I try to do all these things to make them happy. And I'm like, oh, so it's your job to make your partner happy if they've had a rough day at work or the commute sucked. That's your job.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I just smile at them and they're kind of like, oh my God, why is that my job? But like you said, it does take two to tango. So I know once I had that awareness, it's not that my husband does that, but I had my own inclination of, he may not have ever asked me to do it, but I felt like, well, I can cheer you up. I'm really good at cheering people up. I
Yeah.
can change the mood, do a dance, sing a song, whatever. I'm very entertaining when I need to be, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
do I want that to be my job? So then I just had this awareness of, okay, I noticed that, you're a little bit like you didn't have a good day. I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna take the dog on a walk. And if you want to hang out later and you're ready to, should be chilling or even be happy, you know where to find me. But I'm
Well,
not
look,
like,
that's
oh,
you. There's a two-sided thing. You don't want to take your emotions too seriously unless you're choosing them, and you don't want to take others too seriously
mm-mm,
either.
mm-mm.
We feel like because of our relationships, we should be able to cheer somebody up, or they should want to be happy around me if I'm happy. I remember once with my family, I was just like, everybody was like in a Debbie Downer kind of mood. And I was trying to be the cheerleader and get everybody. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm sick of being the energy for all of you people. It's just like, I just cracked. And then I was like, what am I doing? They weren't asking me. They're like, don't be it. But I don't like, it goes back to what we were saying before. I don't like when people wallow in their schmutz. That's just not my game. And because
Yeah.
of my discomfort with that, I was trying to overcompensate for it. So my discomfort should be my focus, not other people's frowny faces.
Yeah. That's
Right.
so
And that's
true.
what we don't take the time
Yeah.
we don't look at our part in what's going on. So they're making me uncomfortable, or I'm uncomfortable, or whatever that is. That's my problem. Why can't I look at somebody with a frowny face? Like, what?
And why do you have to look at it? How many rooms do you have in your place? There's outside. You guys all look sad. I'm tired of looking at your saddy waddies. I'm out of here. I'm going
And
on
I
a
do
walk.
that a lot. And
You know what I mean?
you can't do that in a passive aggressive way. You can't
No,
do it in a
well, you
reactive
could.
way.
I don't recommend it.
If
Yeah, it's just more of a declaration. Hey, you guys seem like you're in a funk. Or when I'm in a funk, I'm in a funk. It's all good.
yeah,
I'm not anybody's job today. I'm just
exactly.
feeling a little in a funk, and it's okay.
Yes,
It's okay.
it is okay.
It's
It really
totally,
is
and
okay.
it's so real. And I think that would be the other appeal. And I sense we're wrapping up here is the more honest you can be with yourself about your emotions,
Yeah.
the more permission you give to your loved ones and your inner circle and your relationships for them to be real with themselves and with you about their emotions, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's because then it's all on the table. You can see it, look at it, laugh at it, whatever. When I get mad at things that I have no control over, I'm hopefully one humorous thought in my own head away from going, yeah, because I do have a good sense of humor. I'm able to kind of laugh my way out of an emotion that's not serving me. And
Yeah.
that's my choice about what emotions are helping me be the Jill I like to be. Are they functional or dysfunctional? Are they fiction or nonfiction? All of those are just they help us be more real. And Jill, I know this about you. I've heard it about me too. There is something very refreshing about hanging out with somebody that is very real with themselves. There's a levity to it. There's a realness to it. It's less bullshit.
Yeah.
It's so refreshing. The authenticity is just like delicious right now because there is so much inauthenticity, manufactured reactions, manufactured drama, and all this stuff. Marketing, everything is marketing now, and
It is.
I'm glad I've always been bad at marketing, but I'm
Same.
great at being real.
I'm bad at it too. But yeah, I think it is really important that if we're not striving, I guess, for being real with ourselves, I think what mostly people are reacting to is and this part I do believe is intuitive, is that they're reacting to the inauthenticness of whatever it is they're seeing. That is their intuition. But all of the interpretation and the programming and the overlay makes it look like something else. And so the authenticity is really lost, or the inauthentic aspects are really lost. Everything is sort of for show. And so, yeah, I like that thought. So what is the gut? Because emotions and the gut seem to be related here. And I'm saying, no, they're not. Emotions are the pre-programmed kind of things. The gut is when we see an emotion and we say, I don't have to have that one, and we stop it. That's authentic. And then what comes out of that is also authentic. So sometimes even when I choose to be angry in a situation, I do it in such an authentic way that it doesn't make the other person feel attacked, even though I'm angry. So there's something very real that comes out. It doesn't matter what your emotion is. It matters the energy behind it. So I feel like if you can take this step and move away from the pre-programmed stuff, then use your emotions, not in passive aggressive ways, but in just very thoughtful ways. No matter what emotion comes out of your mouth, it will be with you authentically behind it, and the response will be different.
Yes. I love that. There are so many applications of what we've talked about to Jill today. Yeah. My head is excited about all the different scenarios that individuals can apply this to for themselves. I hope this was helpful for so many people. The emotions, it's a complicated part of our system, of our humanity, and what I call the human design template. Those emotions, they're really tricky. And I would love for people to feel like they're surfing more than deluged by that tsunami.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Good topic.
All right.
Thanks for this opportunity, Jill. I love these.
Yeah, me too. That was a lot of fun.
All right. You guys, I'm going to ask everybody for this podcast, if you enjoyed it, can you please share it with 2 friends? Can you hit the thumbs up button, depending on where you're experiencing this? If you can leave a review, I know on the Apple Podcast, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, I think within the episode, or maybe it's on the podcast page, the podcast header that lists the episodes, there's a way to leave a review. There's a lot of algorithms that help who sees what, and we're new at this. I've been podcasting for over 10 years, but Jill and I as a team are just getting started, literally. So anything, if you found this useful, if you heard things you haven't heard before on a super important topic like emotional maturity and emotional intelligence, thank you so much for passing it around.
I like that. There's our marketing.
Maybe I'm better than I think.
That's what you got. That's the extent of it. Authentic.
No guilt, no oh, we need you.
It's your fault.
Don't come back here unless you've shared it with 2 people. Threatening. I'm horrible at being threatening. Oh my God. Fail.
Yeah,
Love you, Jill.
I'm too short to be threatening, I think.
Love
All
you.
right, it's a wrap.